What are Scary Skirk's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. To begin, Skirk is going to be an excellent choice if you're looking for a powerful Cryo DPS. As we all know, the recent release of the molding chef Escoffier made Cryo a far more viable element in the meta. So now being a Cryo DPS actually has some value to it. Not only that, but you can imagine how strong she's going to be as the first Cryo DPS to come out after Cryo has been saved. So if you're somebody that likes to collect a strong DPS of every element, then you might want to cast your gaze towards Skirk if you're looking for a good Cryo DPS. She is going to be strong, that I can definitely assure you of. And she has just as much coolness as she has strength, just saying. Skirkaroni is also going to be an absolute freeze legend, because her kit really tailors towards playing with Hydro and Cryo teammates. We all know how Freeze was basically a dead archetype before, but thanks to Escoffier, it's finally relevant again. And then we have Skirk in the picture now, who also really wants to be played with Cryo and Hydro teammates. This means that she's going to offer one of the absolute strongest ways to play Freeze. She's essentially a Freeze unit that's been adapted to fit with the current meta climate. Historically, this has always been an archetype that has thrived in AoE, but this scary lady is going to be able to tackle bosses with ease. It's also worth noting that she does normal attacks. That means that she's comfortably going to be able to use procs-based units such as Xilonen. Speaking of odd synergies, I'm gonna need you to hear me out on this one. Support Mualani. Give me a second to explain, I swear it works. Put Mualani on 4-piece Cinder City, give her an R5 TDDS, and that is unironically going to be a potential Skirk teammate. Because she's still getting quite a lot of HP, and Cinder City's damage bonus percent buffs benefit the Shark Surfer as well, she's actually still going to do okay damage, while somehow effectively supporting Skirk. I would suggest that you use her ult, and then do at least one normal attack, then swap to Skirk. It sounds ridiculous, but you're gonna have to trust me, it will actually work. And of course, her natural compatibility with Hydro units lends her very well to synergizing with our beloved Lady Farina, who, as we all know, is the damage bonus percent buffer to end all damage bonus percent buffers. Unless you're using that crazy Mualani synergy, you're typically not gonna have access to 4-piece Cinder City and Skirk teams, because there's not really any Knotline units outside of the Shark Surfer that work with her. Man, the fact that that synergy even exists in the first place should just go to show how broken 4-piece Cinder City is. Anyways. And of course, for all of my fellow Shenhe fans out there, we are winning, because she's going to be a very good Skirk teammate, since she's able to offer so many Cryo-based buffs. And of course, there's Escoffier Ramsey. This unit was literally made in a lab to work with Skirk, I swear. Both of them are heavily centered around Hydro and Cryo teammates being in the party. It's not rocket science, we can see that these two were indeed intended to be used with one another. Now of course this is going to be a synergy blessed by the celestial heavens above, however, this is somewhat of a double-edged sword. We'll come back to this point later. Another nice thing about Skirk is that she doesn't have ER requirements, specifically if you're trying to play her as an on-field DPS using normal attacks. Because while she does indeed have her own unique energy system, whenever you use her skill, she drains that unique energy. So regular ER does basically nothing for her, meaning that you can focus purely on building offensive stats. Another neat aspect of Skirk is that she doesn't take up your Xilonen. That is one contested unit nowadays, but because she only wants to work with Cryo and Hydro teammates, that means you're naturally thinned down in terms of your options. Meaning that she demands more niche teammates, but in exchange, she doesn't take up some of the really contested ones, such as Xilonen, or even Mawika. So that's able to lighten your load in terms of building an ever viable team. Besides, if you really want 4-piece Cinder City to work in your Skirk team, then that cursed Mualani synergy is right there. I can't believe that's an actually viable thing that you can do, man. But all in all, considering how everyone and their mother really wants to use the DJ Cat, it's nice to have a main DPS unit that feels otherwise. On that topic, I also want to say it's very nice that she's not Night Soul reliant whatsoever, she doesn't really care for the mechanic at all, and your restrictions are pretty much expanded to anyone who's Hydro or Cryo. So she does indeed have some restrictions to your kit, but I'd say that they're better than Night Soul restrictions. Skirk also technically has a dual playstyle. You don't have to play her as an on-field Cryo DPS. Instead, you can opt to play her as an off-field burst nuker. The way this works is that if you're playing somebody like Ayaka or Rio Beastly, then you're able to swap in Skirk from off-field and use her burst. And that's pretty much it. You swap off again, and then swap in again to burst whenever her burst is up. A basic burst nuker playstyle. This isn't actually a waste of your Skirk. This can be quite a strong source of additional damage in your Ayaka or Rio Beastly teams, or even your Ganyu teams. Her 4-piece set is also able to increase burst damage. In my opinion, this was indeed a consideration when Hoyoverse was designing her kit. So if you're somebody that already has plenty of on-field Cryo DPSs but you still really want to pull for Skirk, then don't worry, because using her as a burst nuker is still perfectly viable. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being quite strong. I don't necessarily expect it to overshadow her on-fielder playstyle, but this is a nice way to adapt Skirk onto accounts that already have quite fleshed out Cryo DPSs. This is a whole lot of focus on Cryo DPSs, but I should also mention that this benefits Hydro DPSs too. After all, she works with Cryo and Hydro teammates. That's right, you can use her as an off-field burst nuker in Mr. Settle Down teams. I feel like there's just a guy at Hoiverse where if Novalet doesn't get a brand new teammate once per patch, then he will literally physically combust. And of course, a more niche use case, for all of our C6 beloved Lady Farina mains, off-fielder burst nuker Skirk is going to be pretty decent in freeze teams. As terrifyingly powerful as this slithery snake may be, we indeed have to discuss her flaws, such as how she really wants the molding chef. Those two units were basically made to be used with one another, but that aside, think about it like this. Escoffier saved Cryo. The element is finally viable again because of how busted she is. That character's kit is so jam-packed because that is what Cryo needed in order to be good again. Any Cryo DPS gets majorly gimped if they don't have the molding chef. And honestly, Skirk is no different. She is also most likely really going to want Escoffier Ramsey. Freeze is basically dead if you don't have that character. She provides so much Hydro and Cryo red shred and actually makes freeze teams worth using against bosses, the main primary content that you're going to be facing in the Spiral Abyss these days. Not to mention how she packs all of her amazing buffs and personal damage on top of healing, so she also gives fanfare. This lady has so much going for her. If you're playing Cryo in 2025, then you're playing Escoffier. That is the rule of the universe, essentially. So now I know what you may be asking if you didn't pull for the molding chef. So is Skirk just not worth it anymore? I hate to break it to you, but you would rather invest in another DPS. Yeah, it is that bad. You'll still clear without her if you put in enough investment, that's true, but she does seriously want that character. Think about it like this. Ayaka basically didn't exist in the meta for ages until the chef came out. Why is this any different? It is the unfortunate truth. If you pick up Skirk now, you really want to get Escoffier on rerun. There is a chance the Skirk is going to feel fine during her release banner, because endgames are going to be shelling her a lot, and she will always be viable in Imaginarium Theater, because that game mode is stupid easy. But for viability in more difficult endgames, yeah, you're gonna really want that chef. There's also the fact that she only wants Cryo and Hydro units, but I'm not really gonna harp on this point for too long because I don't really consider this to be a major deal breaker. I think the elemental restrictions are fine, honestly, because I would much rather this over Night Soul restrictions. And there's enough creative synergies at hand, maybe too creative honestly, that you can apply to your teams in order to make them work comfortably. The real root flaw goes back to her dependence on one particular Cryo unit, which we have just discussed extensively, so you get the idea. Another issue is that Ayaka already exists. Now here's the thing, we're obviously gonna have to wait until Skirk comes out, and I'm sure she's going to be very, very powerful, and I would not be surprised if she ended up being the new best Cryo DPS in her premium team. There's also the fact that she's a normal attacker, meaning that she's going to be a whole lot more consistent than Ayaka, who loses a lot of damage if not all of her burst ticks land, which is very, very likely to happen if the boss moves around or something like that. But with that being said, Ayaka with Escoffier is very strong, and not just her, but any Cryo DPS has honestly been boosted up quite a lot in terms of performance recently. If you already have a wide selection of Cryos, unless you're like me who's just getting them all for collection purposes, there's not really any reason to get Skirk. I personally heavily doubt that the Burst Nuker playstyle is even going to be best in slot for any particular Cryo DPS. It's definitely a nice way to use her if you really want her, but I wouldn't really say it's anything that you should pull her over, more so just a fun thing that you can do, nor do I think that it's going to be best in slot for any Hydro DPSs. I mean, I can understand why you would want to do it, the burst animation is absolutely sick, but you get the idea. And with that being said, consider how many other DPSs that we have in general. Skirk is definitely a hyped up character, but don't get lost in that hype. We are right before a brand new Genshin region. They are very soon going to announce a whole new cast of characters. And within Notlon, we have had so many powerful main DPSs. And we've had an absurd amount of strong DPSs released in Fontaine that hold up to this day, or if anything, got better over time. So when pulling for Skirk, you have to ask the usual questions that you ask whenever you pull for a hypercarry. Do you actually need another hypercarry right now? Let alone one that really wants another limited 5-star in order to work at her top potential. Skirk is definitely going to be a strong unit. That I am 100% assured of. If anything, I expect her to become the brand new best Cryo DPS, and I will be surprised if she isn't. Though it is good to remember that a brand new region is right around the corner, and yes, you could always say that usually Genshin tends to release characters that are very important before a brand new region comes out, and that unit ends up being very synergistic with the new characters that come out in the following region, but I don't really think Skirk is that unit. If anything, I think Escoffier is more likely to be that character. Because the unit that falls within that archetype tends to be more supportive. And that type of unit always tends to release in the 0.8 patches anyway. If you're a big Skirk simp, go for it. She's going to be very strong. But just remember that she is far from a necessity, and she definitely does come with her own set of flaws. But how about yourself? Are you going to pull for Skirk, or is it a skip for you? Let me know down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week, every week on Saturdays, start from free UK time. Come along so we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video is able to tell you Skirk's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out. And honestly, her biggest pro is that she trained Tartaglia. I'm forever a child glazer in my heart, even if he fell off.